And I'm telling you, man, for every single one that say they're from Zeta Reticuli, Proxima Centauri, or like random other, solar systems, uh, or galaxies, whatever, they also say like we're from the future. Atom called the caudate nucleus in the putamen, which he claims is like the almost like psychic center, where the neuronal density in that area almost allows somebody to see more UFOs. Like the more neuronal density you have in that area, the more you can somehow see UFOs. And also they hooked up an fMRI to people playing Go. And the more that area of the brain lights up, like when a person makes a brilliant move in Go, which is a counterintuitive move, it's a move that doesn't make any sense actually as an incremental go forward move against the player, given where the pieces are. It only makes sense in the context of the end point of the game. So it's almost like a psychic knowledge of the future that's like causing you to like make this very counterintuitive move. That part of the brain lights up in an fMRI. fMRI tracks blood flow. And so I think it's like this really interesting part of the brain that also we have to go like way deeper on. My one like weird theoretical model that I would, kind of apply to it possibly is, there's this idea that like the brain could be like a room temperature quantum system. So you have like Roger Penrose wrote like The Emperor's New Mind. And, I guess that was his follow-up with Stuart Hameroff, this anesthesiologist. And it was this idea that like the microtubules like, are like really important for the collapse of the wave function. And because it is this important question, like why do we see like macroscopic discrete reality versus kind of the subatomic probabilistic reality? Like why do we?
Jesse, English.
So
I'm
that's
sitting here nodding my head like I understand. Absolutely not.
So Gary, so it's been shown that there is hypothesized to be temporal non-locality in quantum systems. So like you can run like a double slit experiment in the future and you're running it with an entangled photon from the past. And it feels like the future measurement is actually affecting the past. And that's an interpretation. Understood. That's not for sure true. But like there are people who are working on quantum computers right now who hypothesize that a working quantum computer, which we don't have because the bottleneck is keeping the chips coherent, can send information back in time as long as the quantum computer is on. And so if the brain is a quantum computer or a part of it is maybe it's a classical quantum hybrid, whatever, then maybe there is a part of the brain that actually glitches into the future and sends shards or traces of information back in time, explaining these sort of counterintuitive moves, explaining the greater preponderance of UFO sightings if UFOs actually have more to do with time than space, which is my belief.
Can you expand upon that?
Yeah. I think it's this, well, first of all, I think it's a false dichotomy, right? Like you can't get to like Proxima Centauri b or whatever, with nuclear thermal propulsion, with chemical combustion, it takes you 80,000 years, multiple lifetimes. So that doesn't work for like biological mass as we know it. And we're seeing things that seem to look kind of like us. And then you speed that up with nuclear thermal propulsion by maybe 2x. So that's 40,000 years, still totally unworkable. So you kind of need some version of space-time metric engineering, which is time travel. That is time travel to get real space travel. That's interstellar.
Yes.
And so I think it's this false dichotomy. But then you look at the actual observables of the alien thing, and they're these little gray men. And like you look at any UFO database or like Close Encounters of the Third Kind database, like the Edgar Mitchell Foundation has, this database of, I think it's only 5,000-6,000 cases, which is a problem. We need bigger databases. But you look at any of these databases, around or over 50% of the cases involve literally like hominid creatures. So the likelihood that you're seeing a thing from a random foreign planet that's evolutionary converged to like be this hominid sentient advanced technological thing that like looks like us makes no sense. And then you layer on top of that the fact that like gray aliens look like what any evolutionary biologist would probably predict we are going to evolve into. Their ears and noses, because we're not hunter-gathering anymore, they've become vestigial for us. And so they're being selected against. Our eyes are being selected for more screen time. They have slit-like eyes. Our brains are being selected for. Decision-making is becoming far more important. Our bodies and strength are becoming less important. They're kind of sinewy, like weak, whatever. The idea that like these things would look like what we're moving towards and be from a totally random planet makes no sense. And then you can get into like, weird physics models that are like honestly a little above my pay grade, but like this, idea of like Tipler disks and like,
Tipler discs.
yeah. So you had like Gödel had this like, Kurt Gödel had this idea of like time travel, in the early 20th century. And then you had this guy, Frank Tipler, who was like later in the 20th century. And Gödel's whole thing was like, you could time travel, but like you'd have to like, basically like travel like an extremely long distance, and like it's like in effect like works, but like it doesn't really like it's totally theoretical. It's like impossible. And then Tipler had, and again, this is a little above my pay grade, but Tipler had this idea of like shrinking that down to literally a disk, which is hilarious because like that's what we describe UFOs as. And so I think the real guy you should speak to about this guy named Mike Masters, who
wait, that sounds very familiar.
He's awesome, man. He wrote a book called Identified Flying Objects and another one called Extra Tempestrials. And it's these two books that they're the best theory UFO books since Jacques Vallée. And in some ways, they're like even better than some of the Jacques. The Jacques stuff's amazing and set the foundation. But Masters really has an actual theory, which is these are humans from the future. And
does he have any explanation of how far, maybe?
He doesn't, but he goes to like the actual accounts. He goes through like a bunch of accounts. And I'm telling you, man, for every single one that say they're from Zeta Reticuli, Proxima Centauri, or like random other, solar systems, or galaxies, whatever, they also say like we're from the future. And that is a consistent trope. Like Jim Penniston, the Rendlesham Forest case, 1980. Yes. Like he was like, 8,000 years in the future. Like that's what the aliens said that they were from. In many cases, people have to do chemical rinses. They don't infect the future with a foreign pathogen. There's some weird non-interference principle where there's lost time. Maybe that's because you have these weird butterfly effects where like, yes, there has to be lost time or something. And so I don't know if it's from where I might disagree with Masters is like, I don't know if it's from the future. It could be some like extra temporal layer on top of reality. Like whoever these entities are might have actually figured out some sort of time editing or time travel. And they might be living like outside of our time bound kind of, 3D world that where like you have Zeno's arrow of time. Where like you're like moving in this river that's like endlessly moving forward.
Yeah, now you're on it.
Yeah. So I don't know, but like that would be, I would speculate that is, if you're just using scientific inductive thinking and principles, that is the Occam's razor explanation for this. It's not, you're just making up like extraterrestrial stuff. I mean, you're not making it up. They're like Betty and Barney Hill, they said they're from Zeta Reticuli. You have like cases where they say they're from other planets. You have plenty of those, but for every one of those, you have, again, one that says, we're time travelers. And then you look at the actual observables and God, it looks a lot more like time travelers to me than space travelers.
Yeah, I tend to, I don't know if it's because it's the most interesting one to me and it biases me, but that's where my mind ends up always going. We get to the future humans argument. Now, Michio Kaku actually makes in my very humble opinion, a great theoretical argument about time travel where he talks about the tributaries of time, and effectively this is like a infinitesimal or infinite, I guess, like multi-dimensional theory where you talk about the butterfly effect where a butterfly literally flaps its wings and that can change an entire trajectory. You have that happening at every single level of every single thing that ever happens, including what happens in this room right now. So at a high level example for a minute, he always points to, say, April 14th, 1865 at the Ford Theater when Abraham Lincoln gets killed. If you as a human right now, for some reason, had time travel and could go back and you went there and you fucking Uzi'd John Wilkes Booth in the head before he could do it, what he explains, and this makes sense to me, is that does not change the reality of the time you're in. It changes another version of that reality that now exists in its own dimension. Like the transistor radio is turned on another part.
Yeah, forks.
Right. And so you change that. So when we get to the argument, I guess maybe what Masters was saying, I'm not sure if it was what he was saying or what other people were based on what you were going through there, because there was a lot. But like when we get to that argument of like, okay, the future humans are coming here to then work with us in some ways and not, I forget what term you use, but not do certain things so they fuck up their future. Well, I'm not so sure that would be possible to fuck up their future. It's more like they're experimenting for another version of their future.
Yeah, or maybe their future is fucked and they have to come back and like try to reset the thing. Or like, yeah, move down a different path
dimension,
for
though.
another dimension. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't, this all is like really speculative, kind of not even wrong, unfalsifiable stuff. But yeah, maybe it's some sort of multiverse branching or forking thing where like you can go back to a pivotal moment and then fork things in another direction. And I don't know. But I mean, the nuclear connection would also point to that, by the way.
You took the words. You and I are on the same wavelength. There's something going on here
Something
today.
going on.
The basal ganglias are acting up.
Yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth because there's two patterns here that we're not talking about. One of them you just brought up.
Yeah.
Specifically in the 20th century since World War II.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, exactly what you just said, we have a strange connection since the Manhattan Project of UFOs being spotted around nuclear sites where it's like, that old Bob Salas line, it's like they're taking matches out of the hand of a baby and saying, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Right? Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.